Okay, so the exact same person can be low status in one setting with a popular kid or with wealthy people, but high in another with nerdy kids or poor people. Think about the wealthiest person you know. The wealthiest person you ever met in your entire life. And, usually probably in group settings with this person, they were high status or maybe even the highest status in whatever groups you were in because of their wealth and their background and so on. But think also for a second that there's a room that they could go in, there's a group that they could be in, and indeed they've probably been in this group where they're the lowest status person, where their wealth actually isn't that high, right, where it's much lower. And there you have it. There you have the relative nature of status hierarchies. And even the wealthiest person you know somewhere is low status or even lowest status in a group due to their wealth being too low. That would be a room, a group they would be in with even more wealthy people. And indeed, we think that wealth effects, people's interpretation of how wealthy they are, has a lot to do with relative status, right? That people, they can feel poorer when their neighbor next door gets a bigger SUV than them, and they feel like they don't make as much money. They feel like their class status has somehow gone down. Likewise, we could all go to a third world country, and many of you probably have been to third world countries, and there you're incredibly wealthy. So likewise, you've got apparently high status characteristics, but be low status in a certain group. And that's the puzzle of country clubs. Why do wealthy white males hang out in country clubs where they're actually not high status? You think they hang out with people that are higher status than, but I guess the scotch is really good there. So in one day, a person can occupy many status levels. This is actually a famous photograph that I just threw in here, which I think illustrates the relative nature of class and status really well. It's by Alfred Stieglitz. Does anybody know who Alfred Stieglitz was married to? Oh, I heard something this with. Exactly, George O'Keeffe, the great painter. And Alfred Stieglitz was a photographer and one of the first sort of artistic photographers, and he did this painting, or sorry, this photograph called steerage. So what's steerage? Does anybody know what steerage is? That's right. So the lower class cargo space in a ship, and it would be down here. It's the steerage area, and so he's directing your attention there. But also, notice it's central in this picture are two things that the light is sort of catching and are illuminated. One is gangplank that's arced up like this. It goes up to the higher class section of the boat, and then also this man's hat, which looks down into the steerage section, and maybe this woman's robe as well. So this is a great photograph that illustrates the class hierarchy and also the relative nature of status. Okay. So what are some other things that we think we know about status and status processes? What are some other things we think we know? Well, another thing we think we know about how status works, status processes, is that bases of status, status characteristics, are culturally determined. Now, what am I talking about when I say that? What I mean is that different cultures in different historical periods, different societies essentially, will develop different criteria for status differentiation and status stratification. They'll develop a different sense of what are legitimate status characteristics, what are legitimate bases to say, we'll respect this person more than this person. And you may have seen this, when you watch old movies, right, like you get this insight on this, that American culture used to assign greater status advantage to men, right? Men and women are now much more equal in status in this country and in this culture, right? Women are now the majority of the workforce, the majority of the undergraduate college population. But to people who lived 50 years ago, this is an amazing cultural transition. This would have been hard to anticipate 50 or 60 years ago, that the gender gap in status would be closed as much as it has been. Likewise, racial status differences, we believe, have closed a great deal. If you think back, we had school desegregation just 50, 55 years ago, and now we don't, and indeed status differences have closed somewhat since then, although we'll talk later in this lecture about ways in which they haven't closed it nearly all the way. So just in our own culture, we have this observation that status differences have closed or have changed over time, where we still have status differentiation, and we still have unequal status hierarchies, but maybe the bases and criteria of them change. So one of the first scholars to identify the relative nature of status, of bases of status, was Friedrich Nietzsche, and he did this in a book, a classic work of philosophy called The Genealogy of Morals, which was published in 1887. And Nietzsche is somebody who we often make fun. Like, I'll make fun of Freud in this class a great deal. I'll make fun of Heidegger, and I'll probably make fun of Nietzsche as well. And Nietzsche's kind of got it coming. I mean, your sort of typical picture of Nietzsche is as this maligned, unpopular, pasty-faced man in his attic, writing these philosophical tracts about Ubermenches and Superman and how there were these superior blonde beasts who ought to dominate and do what they will. And I think he imagined that he wanted to be one of these. He liked the might makes right sort of philosophy. And Nietzsche, this doesn't sit well with current contemporary cultural sensibilities, and so we make fun of Nietzsche for this sometimes. But Nietzsche was also a great scholar and a great philosopher. And one thing that I think he really got right was this idea, and I feel like he was the first one to clearly enunciate it. And what he said was, the things that we consider meritorious, that we consider good, the things that make us respect one another, they change over time. And here he was going up against a dominant argument. I know you're thinking, boy, that's not shocking. But here, you have to understand the backdrop of this argument. This was in the 19th century in Europe. And at the time, there was a dominant sense that Christian values and Christian morals, whatever bases of respect they prescribe, have been ubiquitous across human history and are the natural, best ways to think of respect and morality and virtue. And Nietzsche went up to that and he said, no, they're not inevitable. There's something inherent in humans that makes them latch on to Christian values and morals. In fact, in different times, in different cultures, in different historical epochs, there have been different standards of morality, virtue, and goodness. So he draws this big comparison between Romans and Christians. And of course, Christianity developed in large part as a cultural response to the morals and values that were inherent in ancient Rome. And he pointed out that the Roman idea of morality and the Roman idea of virtue and the Roman idea of what is deserving respect is based on might, power, competence, excellence, achievement, skill, and so on. Power, whatever. I said power twice because I really meant power. And Nietzsche liked this one, right? This is the one that he liked. He wanted us to get back to this basis of respect. We ought to respect great men. Ubermensch. That's what we should respect, the supermen. And to support this argument, he didn't just look at ancient historical texts from Rome and say, the Romans seem to respect might and power and excellence. He also pointed out that the etymology of the word virtue comes from the Latin, the word virtue, which is essentially goodness and morality, right? That if you go back to the ancient Latin, what did virtue mean? Well, virtue had this whole other path linguistically and became our contemporary word virtuoso. And virtuoso is a window into what? Window. And it was a window. Mace Windu, sorry, Star Wars. I'm thinking about Star Wars apparently at some subconscious level. Purple lightsaber. So it was some insight. Okay, so virtuoso as a word, a contemporary word, and what it means gives us some insight on what the Romans thought virtue meant, because this word has been largely unchanged over time in terms of what it means. And what virtuoso is someone who's extremely skilled, extremely excellent, right? Like Michael Jordan or Bill Gates or Yo-Yo Ma. I mean, we can contest, whether or not, obviously Magic Johnson was a better basketball player than Michael Jordan. I know. Okay, Will Chamberlain, would you do that? Dang, all right. Get some Michael Jordan lovers. Okay. Okay, we might contest how great was Bill Gates or whatever, but in any event, these people have achieved high status due to their achievements, their excellence, and what they do, perceived or real. So that's what virtue used to mean. When the ancient Romans talked about a virtuous, good, moral person, what they were talking about was somebody who was excellent and achieved great things. And then now, our culture is dominated more by a Christian conception of virtue, right? And even when we hear the word virtue, we don't think virtuoso, right? We think of virtue in a very Christian sense of a sort of pro-social person, a person who's good to others. Well, I can't even stop using the words good and virtue, right? Because I'm so stuck in the contemporary conception of virtue. But we mean now generosity, honesty, self-sacrifice, that sort of thing. And so a virtuous person, so virtue now might be principled, ethical, chaste, and I think I actually wrote something beneath here you're not going to see. But that was good. This stuff down here was among the best stuff in the entire semester, which unfortunately you're going to miss that. But Just that was a knockout punch on this whole lecture, I swear to God. So now, with the rise of Christianity and the rise and domination of Judeo-Christian ethics, which Nietzsche documents in the Genealogy of Morals, we now think of virtue as people who are good in a contemporary sense, generous, honest, principled, and so on, integrity, that sort of thing. Not achievement, not power, not might, maybe competence, but mostly these good things, looking after other people. And these examples were like a priest or a nun were the ones that he kept talking about. But you might imagine a relief worker, or a peace corps person, or a social worker as being someone who seems very virtuous. Those would be like secular versions. But Nietzsche was very focused on virtue being now a Judeo-Christian religious concept, and so he highlighted priests and nuns as classic examples of high virtue people in the contemporary culture. So Nietzsche makes a good case that over time and across cultures, that which is good, that which is moral, that which is virtuous, has changed a great deal and will continue to change. It's something we've seen in our lifetime. It's something that he shows us has happened over the last 2,500 years, and it's hard to say that he's wrong because the evidence is strong. Okay, it's all coming out. Okay. All right, so that's okay. All right. Next, another thing that we think we know about status, and this is a very controversial thing. Every time I teach this, people get kind of pissed off. And we can contest how much this is true, but this is a fundamental idea from status research that has a lot of research in support of it, and it is the idea that status beliefs, these bases of status differentiation, and status hierarchies in groups, tend to be broadly shared. What do I mean by that? I mean that everybody in a given culture tends to have the same ideas about what is meritorious and status relevant, and what the status characteristics are. Everyone in a culture tends to share their impression of that. Likewise, everybody in a group tends to agree on what the status hierarchy in that group is. Why? Because they're in the same culture. They have the same rules for how you put together the status relevant information. So when we all enter some group, we know that males are more respected, that whites are more respected, straight people are more respected, higher social class people are more respected. We also know that more intelligent people, more educated people are more respected, and we all put the status hierarchy together following the same rules. And in a second, we'll talk about a theory that sort of explains how those rules work. But one implication of this is that low status people will tend to believe their low status position is legitimate in the same way that high status people believe their high status position is legitimate. And that also people tend to endorse larger status beliefs in the culture and in the society that maybe even disadvantage them. So what's an example of this? Okay, Goldberg 1968 is a classic example of this. In Goldberg 1968, this woman did an experiment where she was interested in whether men or women as authors, whether their text would be evaluated more positively. And she found that if a text was identified as being authored by a woman, then it would be evaluated lower. That would be seen as like not as good a text. And remember I said that the things that higher status people say tend to be more positively evaluated, the things that lower status people say tend to be more negatively evaluated. This is an example of that. Even if you write what you say and it's a text and people evaluate it, this will tend to be the case. So that isn't that amazing, right? We think we already know that higher status people, that the things they produce are more positively evaluated. The Goldberg observation was that both men and women exhibited this bias. It was the case that both men and women, as raters, as people reading a text, tended to rate the exact same text as being higher quality, more insightful, a better text if it was authored by a man than if it was authored by a woman. This is a bit of a puzzle. Why would women endorse status beliefs that disadvantage them in the 60s or perhaps even now? It's a puzzle. But the point is that status beliefs are based on culturally legitimate beliefs that we all sort of share about what is meritorious. Now you might think, no, I don't necessarily buy into that. Like, I don't just respect rich people more than poor people, or I opt out of this one, or I opt out of that one. And these are status beliefs. This is generally the case. Maybe you're right that you're different, but generally it's the case that status beliefs are shared in a culture. Yes. Yes, internalized racism would be a good example, or a term for the race-specific example of this. And we'll talk about that more. So, the best example, or the earliest evidence for the internalization of race as a basis of status, internalized and accepted by even the disadvantaged group, would be the Kenneth and Mamie Clark doll experiments. Is anybody familiar with these experiments? Okay, cool. So, in the Kenneth and Mamie Clark doll experiments, what they did was they went down to the Deep South, I believe it was all done in the Deep South, and they presented black children with white dolls and black dolls, and like, you know, the kind of dolls you play with when you're a kid, and asked them a series of questions, including which one's prettier, which one do you want to play with, and one of the big kickers is they asked them which one is better. So which one is better? Remember, status is supposed to be about how good somebody is. And if these social psychologists are right, that status is, that the basis of status differentiation in a society or in a culture are broadly shared and endorsed even by people who are disadvantaged by them, then we would expect black children in the Deep South in the 1950s to say the white doll is better. The white doll is better, it's prettier, and I'd rather play with it. And that's exactly what they found. Also, when asked to color themselves with crayons, they would color themselves as lighter, in a lighter shade than they actually were, which is very sad. So this research, the reason Kenneth and Mamie Clark did this research is they wanted to show that institutions of discrimination in the South, like school segregation, were having real damaging psychological effects on the people that were disadvantaged by real damaging effects on African American children in the South. And so as a result, it was cited in the Brown versus Board of Education decision in 1954, which desegregated the schools. So this is something that Thurgood Marshall and NAACP cited as like, here is hard scientific evidence that there's damaging effects going on as a result of racial discrimination or racial segregation in the United States. Just a side note, Kenneth and Mamie Clark were the first and second African Americans to receive PhDs from Columbia. They received PhDs from Columbia University in psychology and passed away recently, a few years ago. Just too bad. They were real heroes of our discipline. So this observation that people tend to internalize and accept status beliefs that disadvantage them in ones which they wouldn't necessarily intellectually agree with, but they nonetheless tend to internalize them and take them and believe them at some more fundamental level, was part of the impetus for the Black is Beautiful movement of the 1970s, which tried to reject these findings and sort of say, no, we're going to effectively not believe this cultural message that we're not beautiful, or we're not as good as these other people. And has anybody ever seen this film, A Girl Like Me? Raise your hand if you've seen it. This is really, really good. I advise, please, all of you go to YouTube and check out this video. It's really good, right? This is amazing. Because you might be saying right now, this couldn't happen today, right? This is something that happened in the early 1950s in the Deep South in the United States. And you know, you've read books, you've seen films about the Deep South in the early 1950s. I mean, it was a rough place, right? Like if you went down to desegregate schools, people would kill you, you know? And so you're thinking, wow, what kind of relevance does that have to my world right now in the contemporary US in the 21st century? Probably not much, right? Schools have been integrated for 40-some years. These status differences we believe have narrowed. We have a black president. You know, this has got to be over, right? We should watch A Girl Like Me, because this woman decided to replicate the Kenneth and Mamie Clark doll experiments about 2 years ago. And this documents the results she found. And basically the takeaway is that, yeah, she was able to replicate these findings, and they were essentially unchanged. Okay. So let's talk about a theory about status. Or actually, let's take like a 2 or 3 minute break and we'll come back and talk about this theory about status. Better yet. 2 or 3 minutes. I know. You're doing the hissing already. It's good. Okay. Okay. Let's get class going. We'll get started. On a somewhat somber note, we must now review this theory that was introduced at Stanford University in the 1960s. So upset. I'm so sorry to have done this. I know you just got back from spring break. You're trying to get excited about college, and I want you to be excited about college here at this fine, the greatest public university in the history of humanity. and yet, here I am talking about this other school, this local school. So we'll just call it that, the local school. Okay, so there was this theory developed at the local school in the 1960s by Joe Berger and company, and strangely, anomalously, given what we think we know about that place, it's a very, very good theory. This theory describes status processing groups very well, and a lot of things that I've been describing to you, like how people take status characteristics and status relevant information and combine them in their heads in order to create relative status hierarchies, that's described by this theory. Likewise, the relative nature of status is something that's captured well by this theory. So let's talk about this theory, which supposedly captures status dynamics and how they work in groups very well. Well, status characteristics theory asserts that observable characteristics that differentiate group members, things like age, gender, race, several of these characteristics I've been talking to you about, that they're differently valued in a culture. We all sort of know in a culture which one is higher status than the other. We think we all know that males tend to be more respected than females, perhaps less so than before, but that gap is not closed all the way. That whites are more respected than members of minority races. And so they're differentially valued in a culture. They generate differential expectations of competency for group members. That the more respected category tends to lead to expectations of competence. So we expect men to be more competent, for example, in a committee meeting or in a group task. And then in consequence, as a result of that, it leads to a hierarchical distribution of participation and influence across members of the group. So in a group, we all sort of say, what are the observable characteristics that differentiate people? How are they valued in this culture we're all in? And then, yes, these more higher status people will tend to be expected to be more competent. They're seen as more competent. And then in turn, they'll be asked to participate more. They will themselves volunteer to participate more in groups. And then they'll have more influence over the other group members. And when I say participation, I don't mean like being in a walkathon or something. I mean like actually speaking in groups, actually partaking in the conversation, saying more than the other people in the group and so on. Okay. They argue that there's two types of status characteristics, diffuse and specific. Diffuse status characteristics are attributes that are believed to provide an indirect indication of a member's level of ability on the group's task, but typically are bases of discrimination in larger society, and the kind of things we would think of is probably not merit-based ways to sort the status hierarchy. So example, these are race and gender. I keep using these examples, and they are the dominant examples in our culture. Then they also talk about specific status characteristics, and these are attributes that are more directly and precisely indicate someone's level of ability on the group's task. So knowledge of history, if we're working on like a history student project, would be a specific status characteristic. Or if we're all this is an absurd image, if we're all trying to fix a broken car, that would be weird. I can't imagine that would happen. That might be like a weird dream you had. In that group, greater knowledge of cars, greater mechanical ability would be more respected. So there's a group setting where knowledge of mechanical knowledge would be a very high status, specific status characteristic, and another one was knowledge of history. So these are context specific characteristics, specific status characteristics. However, what they found in research on this theory is that specific status characteristics that are relevant to a task have a lot of influence on who we defer to, who participates more, who has influence, and so on. Right? Like I said, if we're repairing a car and a mechanic's in the group, we're going to defer a lot to him or her. Right? But also specific status characteristics that are not relevant to the task also influence rates of participation and influence in the group. So it's the case that if I knew you were very skilled at math and working on a history project, the sheer fact that I know of some really high skills you have will tend to lead me to defer to you.